Okay, so this has been a day already, with the information coming fast and furious. A Quinn Hughes appearance for USA come Thursday. Hey, Zach. What's FanDuel doing with the odds of Quinn Hughes playing in this game?
That's what I'm like. I'm looking for Jake Sanderson to get some illness.
Jake Sanderson
Somebody give me odds
the
on
sniffles
those.
out of an abundance of precaution.
Yeah.
Head coach Mike Sullivan saying, we want to make sure that the Ottawa Senators have Jake Sanderson available for their playoff push. Wish him all the
Right,
best.
that's the one. Yeah. Yeah. Someone dropped the puck on Sanderson's toe in the locker room this morning. It was Mike Sullivan.
How's your back feeling, Jake? Oh, fine. How's your back feeling, Jake? Oh, not fine.
Yeah. How does this crowbar to the knee feel? Whoops.
Oh, no, that's very good. Have a Nancy Kerrigan moment here at the Four Nations. That really took a turn there. They took us down a side street on that one. Well, listen, welcome to the program today. We have a lot to get to, and we still have some distance now, Zach, between today and Thursday. So everybody can ratchet up their own personal outrage machine, whether it's about Quinn Hughes, whether it's about Bill Guerin begging the president to come to TD Garden to watch the Americans face off.
Yeah.
Cue up your own outrage. All right, cue up your own outrage machine.
That's going to play out well on social media for
Still
sure.
got time. Oh yeah, everyone will have a level head about it because we don't live in a social media culture of extremes at all. Everyone has very level-headed,
calm.
Yes, of course, calm takes about everything. Anyhow, so today's a really good day to do something very specific here. That and my bad for not doing this previous as well. But I was pretty much following the idea that like the two main teams in this Four Nation face-off that were taking up a lot of the oxygen, and we were guilty of it as well, are Canada and the United States. And that's going to be the final. But, listen, you can't say you love international hockey and then just focus on two teams because there are two other teams in this Four Nations face-off, and that is, of course, Sweden and Finland. So we'll talk to Arpon Basu coming up in about half an hour's time about Finland. And, man, like, Zach, how different a tournament is it? I know injuries it's hockey, but how different a tournament is it if Miro Heiskanen is in the Finnish lineup? Like I know that again, like the Quinn Hughes issue with USA is significant, obviously, but I don't know that there was one injury that really hammered a team more than Heiskanen not being available for Finland. I've always, by the way, whenever I make up my little nickel and dime point about Brad Park, one of the best defensemen in the history of the game that,
Yes.
It just happened to be playing in an era where there was Bobby Orr and Larry Robinson and Dennis Potvin, and like, good luck, finding yourself anywhere close to scratching the Norris Trophy, even though he's one of the best defensemen of that era. He's not getting anywhere near that trophy. I look at Miro Heiskanen right now and say to myself, you're playing in the era of Victor Hedman and Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes and Adam Fox. Heiskanen's awesome. And in a lot of other generations, probably got 2 Norris trophies by now. But I can see him going through his entire career not getting one. And he's still, full stop, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Anyhow, we'll get into the Finns. You have a quick thought on the Finns, and we'll turn our attention to the Swedes here in a second.
Impressive tournament by them. I don't know, maybe if you didn't as much. I completely wrote them off, especially after the Heiskanen thing where it was like going in, I thought that they were the 4th best team. Right. And then the way that they played intensity-wise and kind of systems-wise and the buy-in from everybody and just how well they performed in each of the games, it was pretty surprising. It was exciting to see because I think it made the level of intensity and everything in the tournament matter a little bit more. It wasn't just Canada, US, and that was it. And, I mean, to your point, I can't really say much more, but you look at those margins and how tight things were in some situations.
Yeah.
Guy like Miro Heiskanen, who's probably playing, 28 minutes for Finland a night?
Yeah.
Maybe swings things in your favor.
make a difference. We'll talk about Sweden here in a couple of seconds with our good friend Uffe Bodin. In the meantime, daily outlines presented as always by our friends and partners at FanDuel, North America's #1 sportsbook app provider. And here's what's on the agenda today. Charlie McAvoy will not suit up for the United States. Like, here's the thing. One of the things that I really don't like is people sort of dancing on injuries. For my money, I like the break a couple of days here between yesterday and Thursday, because I want the best possible version of each team, which is why this one is a stinger for USA, to say nothing of what this could mean for the Boston Bruins down the stretch here. But for USA, this one is really tough, and that opens a door for, surprise, surprise, coming to the ring, led by his manager, Hulk Hogan, with an eagle on his shoulder. Quinn Hughes joins the mix for Team USA here, because it hasn't been a dramatic enough day already. Uffe Bodin joins us here in a couple of moments from Hockey's Farige, our good friend and noted Swedish hockey analyst Arpon Basu, as I mentioned, will talk to us about Finland and their tournament and a sort of a time and temp, really an information session on where Finnish hockey is right now. In the meantime, let's get right to our first guest. He is the respected and responsible publisher of Hockey's Farige. He is a longtime Swedish hockey reporter and commentator. He is the one and only Uffe Bodin, and it's great, Uffe, to see you again, my friend. How are you, and what time is it, by the way, right now in Sweden? I want to make sure we're not getting you up at an ungodly hour.
No, it's just a bit past 9 p.m., so it's not too bad. And especially during this tournament, sleeping hours have been a bit irregular, to say the least. So I'm up for it.
Okay,
always for you, Jeff.
Listen, I appreciate it. We've all been fans of your work, and I'm right up at the top of that list. I mean, you and I have known each other for a long time. When I have any Swedish hockey questions, it's an easy text right away to you. Now, let me ask, before I get into Team Sweden specifically and some of the players and the future and the Olympics, you're watching this tournament. Do you have a sort of wide brush thought on the tournament itself, the format? I mean, this is in replace of the All-Star game this year. Do you have a sort of general thought on the tournament itself?
I mean, speaking as a Swede and, just looking around to see what kind of interest there's been in the tournament in Sweden, it's actually surpassed my expectations, I have to say. Especially with the time difference, as mentioned, it's a bit hard to follow the NHL sometimes. So I think especially the Saturday game really was this enormous opportunity to showcase, our best players of this generation. And it's been 9 long years, Jeff. I was with you and Colby in Toronto during the World Cup 2016, and when you sat there, you just thought it was just going to be 2 or 3 years, and you were going to see that kind of hockey again. So, just like for Canadian fans seeing McKinnon, Crosby, and McDavid play together, for us just seeing Carlson and Hedman together, and they turned 25 this year. So from that perspective, it's been awesome, obviously. But then there's the results, and that's not been so good.
Okay, let me throw this one at you. Sweden didn't lose a game in regulation.
No, that's true. That's actually true. Which makes it even worse.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm trying to. I always have a sort of default, and this is my own past and my own bias. But growing up, the first player that I attached myself emotionally to as a kid was Börje Salming, number 21 for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he opened the door to not just Swedes but a number of Europeans to make their way to the NHL. And so I always sort of have this default that I don't really care who wins, but I want Sweden to do well. And as a Canadian, I want Canada to do well. But at the end of the day, I just want to watch good hockey here. But somewhere along the line here, whether it's at the World Juniors, whether it's at one of these international events, like I really want to see Sweden win a championship. How was the? I mean, you mentioned that there was interest in Sweden from this tournament. What about the results? Like, how did this go over based on expectations for this team? Like going into it, I'll be honest. I looked at Sweden. I look down the middle and I look at the centers and I say, I don't know, like that's a power position. This is going to be hard.
Yeah, I agree, and that was basically what I said as well. I was rather positively surprised by how they played against Canada, and actually getting a point out of that actually made me a bit optimistic. You guys mentioned, the losses at the Finnish blue line, and the sort of blue line they had to patch together. So going into that game, you felt like wow, but then during that game, it became so evident. Like you saw what Barkov and Rantanen did, and sort of Sweden didn't have, those impact players among the forwards. I mean, we can talk all day long about what's going on in Vancouver, but you spent so many hours doing that already. So I think it's a moot point. But Zibanejad in New York, Pettersson, the best centerman was by a mile was Joel Eriksson-Ek. And that's great, but he's not the guy who's going to drive our offense, obviously. And then when Lucas Raymond and Adrian Kempe are probably your two best forwards, then that's great too. But you need more from guys like Philip Forsberg, William Nylander, and those guys who are supposed to drive the offense. So I think just the lack of, that elite talent up front was, to me at least, the difference, because I thought, from the defense did what we sort of expect them to do. So it could have used some more upfront, and I mean both overtime to see what kind of chances they have, and then the puck gets turned over, it goes the other way, and you have two really good shots from Mitch Marner and Mikael Granlund, and it's over. So it's you can talk about how close it is, but in the end, you just need those guys that can do the extra, take you the extra mile.
I want to drill down on a few players, but before I get there, let me float something your way. Listen, I've been talking a lot about here in North America for if you're looking for replacements for the All-Star game, for example. Not unlike what the women do with the rivalry series, Canada versus U.S., but that's spread out over a number of months. I've been talking a lot about just give people here what they want, and they want to see Canada versus U.S. The emotions are close to the skin, the competitiveness is right there, and at the same time, I say to myself, well, you know what? Maybe Swedes and Finns would like to do the exact same thing. How would it go over if there was, instead of this Four Nations face-off, there was two summits. One, Canada versus the United States, do it in Boston and Montreal, and then in Stockholm and Helsinki or wherever, you do Sweden versus Finland. What would those games be like? What would a best of 5 series like that be like?
Amazing. I mean, probably not to the level that we saw between Canada and the US.
No fights? No fights off the draw?
No, I don't think so. But yeah, it's been, it's funny you mentioned it. But I actually thought about it when you mentioned it last week as well, that, something like that would just be a hockey dream come true, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
Because we haven't had a lot of those occasions. I mean, we have the World Championships every year, but it's pretty much the leftovers from the Stanley Cup playoffs that are competing for that. So it's not, it's not best on best. So yeah, I'm 100% backing that. That would have been such a cool event, and probably do a lot for the rivalry as well. Because not that it's been lacking, but best on best is always, because then you can remove any argument, well, the best didn't play or whatever people want to say when Sweden loses to Finland in a regular setting. So that would be just amazing, just thinking about it.
Let me drill down on a couple here. I'm glad you mentioned Eriksson-Ek. Tournaments like this, I shouldn't say that not a lot of people. Some people don't watch the Minnesota Wild as often as others. going to give that a soft landing. So maybe not a lot of people know about Joel Eriksson Ek, at how he's one of the best two-way players in the game, period. I mean, you followed him. You follow all these guys, like from when they were young players. From when you first saw him to where he's at now, what's been the process, the development, the maturation of someone like Eriksson Ek?
Yeah, I mean, you always saw like this responsible two-way centerman that was quite physical. He has actually produced a bit more than I ever thought he would, because I mean, as a junior player, he showed some offensive talent, but not to the level that I thought it would translate to the NHL. So I still think he could probably, if he is healthy, he could probably score 30 goals during the regular season, and at the same time be somewhat quasi Selke Trophy candidate. So
Yeah.
he has a lot of things going for him, and you know what, he's and that's been kind of the evident thing here too, that you talk about toughness. It's not hitting and all of that. It's just a matter of mental toughness, and I think he has that in his game. And I think that's something that the Swedes lacked a bit in this tournament. It became very evident that Gabriel Landeskog was not playing, for example. That would have been a very good player to have in a setting like this. But I think Joel Eriksson Ek, he has that, and he's good at getting under opponent's skin, which is kind of funny because he's not a big talker or anything, but he has just this way of just getting people pissed off. And that's kind of funny. You saw that in the Finland game that he and Patrick Laine didn't get along very well, and you'd like to see more of that from the Swedes. Just being able to get under the opponent's skin, and he was the one guy who could do that.
It's interesting that you mentioned toughness, because in hockey, I've always felt there's two kinds of toughness. There's the toughness where you impose your will and your strength on someone else. And then there's another brand. I'll go back to Boreas Salming on this, and this is also very true of the Sedins. The toughness where you can take a beating, you can take physical punishment, and not change your game. Like the thing about Salming was like guys would like whack and slash and punch and attack Salming, same as the Sedins, and they never changed.
Yeah,
the Sedin, Heinrich and Daniel never changed how they played. And Boreas Salming never changed the way that, and this is one of the reasons, I'll tell you, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. I mean, that one of my favorite players is Peter Forsberg. One of the reasons I loved Peter Forsberg is there was that time, because I grew up hearing all the slander towards Swedes in the 70s. And I just loved it that there was a time in the NHL where the best power forward was Swedish. And I just absolutely love that. And every time I see anyone do that bump back hit, I think of Peter Forsberg, right? Like that is the legacy of Peter Forsberg still on the ice. I have the puck, but I'm still going to hit you. It's Peter Forsberg. Is there, when you look at Swedish hockey now, is there still that same type of Salming, Sedins meets Forsberg spirit? Like I see it in Hedman. Like I still see that kind of toughness in Hedman too. Well, just refuses to change his game, and he's big and strong too. But is that same spirit still there, or is it different now in Swedish hockey?
I would say it's quite different. We don't have too many types like that, unfortunately, and I guess it's a cultural thing to some degree. I mean, we've had players that have been, I mean, Patrick Hornquist is another example, someone who just took a beating. Thomas Holmstrom, what he did. I don't know how his back is feeling these days, but I mean, he was constantly getting slashed by Ed Belfour or basically anyone in the NHL for 15 years. So, you wish you had more, like, can you call them role players that could still produce and be tough in that sense that you just explained. And I mean, we get more and more skilled guys, and that's obviously nice. It's very entertaining, but I think to win championships has been proved over and over again. You need that extra mental toughness, and you need those guys to actually be able to take a beating and go the full mile.
Goaltending. I was really happy to see Sammy Ersson last night and what he was able to do. I mean, the second half of that game, USA is just piling it on, turning it on, turning it on, and Ersson was great. He's had a challenging year with the Philadelphia Flyers. The Philadelphia Flyers have had a challenging year. Do you have a thought here quickly, Uffe, on, and I do want to ask you about Elias Pettersson in a sec, but do you have a quick thought on Sammy Ersson here?
Yeah, I mean, no one expected him to play in the first place. I mean, he was called in due to Jacob Markstrom's injury, and
Yep.
and I mean, it was a lot of strange coincidences that led to him actually getting this chance. I mean, Philip Gustafsson got sick during the Finland game, and then Linus Ullmark gets sick right before the US game. So suddenly they're down to their third goalie, and Hughes actually put up the best performance of the Swedish goalies in the tournament.
Yeah.
Mind you, he had a lot of help from his good old pipes. I don't know how many shots the Americans snapped off the pipes, but it must have been like 10 or something. It felt like it
Dylan
kept
Larkin's
ringing all the time.
Dylan Larkin's going to have a migraine that's going to last until the summer for how hard he hit that
Exactly.
post yesterday. I mean, Larkin's firing it so hard right now, and man, that was, I mean, just from my couch, it sounded loud in Boston.
Yeah, but I'm super happy for the guy. I think because he's been on a long journey. When he grew up, no one believed in him. He kind of just suddenly became this young, talented goalie that came from nowhere, and he's made it all the way to the NHL. So it's hard not to share for a guy like that. And I mean, sure, it's not been a lot of fun with the Flyers, but I think he can be an NHL goalie, and I think he's about to really show that.
Okay, Elias Pettersson is one of the stories coming out of this one. I don't know why. It's always interesting. People are waiting. I think people think positively and want the best for people as a default. That you're thinking, okay, you know what? He's among his countrymen. This is going to be a quick change of scenery for Elias Pettersson, and it's going to be off to the races, and he's going to come back. He's going to be a changed player. We all know that history says generally that doesn't happen. I don't know if this is, I mean, it's probably a combination of a few things. There's the drama with JT Miller from the beginning of the season, which has extended into history, as we all know. There's also the injury, the lack of being able to train properly, perhaps, in the off season. But I think, here's a question that everybody's certainly in Vancouver. And because it's Elias Pettersson, it's a bigger story than just that single market. A lot of people in the hockey world are wondering, Uffe, who is Elias Pettersson? Is he this guy? Is he someone that we saw a couple pre-contract extension? Who is Elias Pettersson, do you think?
Yeah, and I wish I had an answer for you there. I mean, it's mind-boggling just you describing it that way, because, I mean, 2 years ago he was a 100-point guy in the NHL, and beginning of last year he was actually he topped the scoring list for a while there during the fall. And somehow, I mean, injury for sure, but yeah, it's hard to grasp what has happened over the last 18 months or so. And I honestly don't have a good answer for you. And I think that's something that him and the Canucks are going to have to work very hard on, solving, because you can't have like an 11.6 million player play at that level that he's been at this season. It's not going to work. And is his future in Vancouver? I'm not so sure anymore. But also, having a show like this in this tournament is probably not going to help them trying to deal him either, because it's not like he's marketing himself in a good way.
So I'm going to go completely against what I just said. So someone at the tournament who did look completely different than he did this season in the NHL is Erik Karlsson.
Yeah.
Erik Karlsson looked, I mean, Uffe, so good at this tournament. You're watching this and you're saying, holy smokes, like, it's Pittsburgh's not going anywhere right now. Like, this is like a sneaky rebuild here. As much as they're not going to move the big pieces, they're trying to sort of build underneath and stock assets and young players and draft picks, etc. You look at this and you say, man, can we get Erik Karlsson to a place where that guy that we saw in this tournament is playing in the NHL. Do you have a thought on what you saw from Karlsson? Because that's not the Karlsson we've seen playing with the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's a different guy.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It was actually the same thing when he joined the World Championships last year for the first time in a very long time, and he looked so happy. He was just chatting with everyone, just being extremely, you know, friendly and just taking it all in. And I think he understands. He's reaching sort of the end of his career in a few years, and he hasn't really won anything during his career. So getting a chance like this, I think it sort of gives him some more energy to just go in on this stage and perform at a higher level. At the same time, I have to say that from the Pittsburgh Penguins games I've been watching lately, I think he was trending in the right direction. So I think this came at a very good time for him. But yeah, for sure. I mean, you can see that there's still a player there, and I mean, of course, this is not what the Pittsburgh Penguins ambitioned when they traded for him a few years back. But I mean, if it wasn't for the salary, I'm sure someone would happily, take a shot and see what he could do in top four role, play, power play minutes and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but it was just nice seeing him be able to perform at the level again.
He looked great. Let me ask you about what's next. I mean, as soon as this tournament is done on Thursday, everyone's back to their NHL teams, and that continues. But in the background is now going to be, okay, the focus is going to turn very quickly to the Olympics. And from what you saw with Sweden, where are the areas that you look at and you say, we've already identified down the middle. I know that's an issue, but still, like, where are the areas that you look at and you say, okay, this is where Sweden is solid. This is where Sweden needs work. Who's coming back? Is the blue line too old? Is there still room for Mattias Ekholm here? Is there still going to be Victor Hedman's blue line to run, etc.? Which Markstrom are we getting? Sometimes his season's kind of flip-flop. Like when you think about this team in the Olympics next year, like what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind, Uffe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the age thing is interesting, and it's funny you mentioned Ekholm. He was supposed to be scratched against the Americans, and then a few players got sick, and he had some really sour comments after the game because he played less than 10 minutes, and he's not used to that. He used to be relied upon, and also he wore a letter on his sweater, so I'm sure it's going to be a pretty uncomfortable conversation between him and the coach. Before leaving. So that's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I still feel like a guy like Hedman is probably going to captain the team over the Olympics, but there are a few guys that, are coming. I mean, Simon Edvinsson is really looking good in Detroit.
Great year.
Yeah. And Philip Broberg, he has some injury issues, but he's turning into a player. So there are a few guys that are actually knocking on the door. Marcus Patterson, Adam Larson. I mean, the blue line, there's so many guys that could actually step in, and Rasmus Anderson only played this last game too. Yep. So I'm not too worried about the blue line. I think as where we start off with the center position is going to be interesting to see, because I think a guy like Leo Carlsson needs to take steps here because I hope that both Zibanejad and Elias Pettersson can bounce back, but it's nothing that you can really count on at this point.
Right.
So I think the center position is going to be the big question mark for me next year as well, because you need someone. I mean, just looking back at former Swedish teams when you've had the Backstrom, Zetterberg, Sedin. I mean, just a plethora of good options, and now suddenly, just within a year, no one is really performing at the level you're expecting. So I think the center position for sure is that's where the concern is.
You watched, let me pick that one up on this. You watched William Nylander as a young player in Sweden, and you played center. Has there been any talk? Because there always is in Toronto. And they try it, and then they pull back. I mean, he's been false started so many times at the center position. Is there any way that Team Sweden would consider making him a center, or is that too experimental?
I think it's too experimental. I think that would need to happen in Toronto and work, and not just be 1 or 1.5 preseason game and then just go back to whatever it was before. So I have a hard time envisioning that. But there are a few good centers coming. I'm really high on Anton Frondell, who's probably going to be a pretty early pick in the draft. He's really picked up his game. He had some injury and other issues at the beginning of the season, but now he's really picked it up and looks like he can really be a player and just a complete player too. So I mean that's a few years down the line, but he looks like someone. So if he and Leo Carlson could become the players that they have potential to become, then it certainly looks much better in a hurry.
Things change quickly. Listen, I know you're busy. Thanks for taking time for me today. Always appreciate it. Always good to see you. Always good to hear from you. You be well, and we'll check back soon. Thanks for this as always, Uffe.
Thank you. I'm a noted sheethead, so I'll be lurking in the chat for sure.
We have them in Sweden. Awesome. Thanks, Uffe.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. There he is.
Thanks, guys.
The great Uffe Bodin, who joins us here on the sheet. He's a wonderful guy and a great Swedish hockey historian as well. Like Uffe is one of my go-to people. I have a question about Swedish hockey history or the background on anybody. It's a quick phone call or a quick text, and he's got that memory and he's got that knowledge. Zach, real quick before we get to Arpon Basu on Finland here in a couple of moments. When you look at Sweden, like again, I'll look right down the middle and say, okay, problem spot there. On the wings, real solid. I still do like their blue line. Swedish goaltenders are still solid as well. Like, what do you see when you see Team Sweden? And man, are you like me that you just want them to win one of these things somewhere down the road? Like at the World Juniors, they always run the table in the round robin and then flame out and never make it to the final. Anyhow, your thoughts on Sweden?
Yeah, I do cheer for Sweden. I like it. I like watching them play. I mean, I also had a really good experience when I was a kid. I got to go play a tournament in Sweden. We played Finland, and before we did,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but before we did, we played an exhibition game in Sweden. We played against Nacka in their rink, and it was like an old barn, the wood, everything going over. Awesome. We got off the plane, went straight to the rink, practiced. We played them later. We had dinner with them after the game, the team we just played, and we went outside and played soccer with them out on the field. And it was dead of winter, but the soccer field is heated so that they could still play.
No
so
way.
It's snowbanks all the way around and then just clear area for you to play soccer. So we went out and played with them. So I've always kind of just liked them, and it was super fun to hang out with those guys and all that kind of stuff. But Sweden, the one thing I saw with this tournament that really stood out to me was it's not even just like their ability to score. They were struggling to generate offense. Like it felt like a lot of times you'd see them kind of make a great play in the defensive zone, start to get out, and then basically once you got crossed, center, it was like they were looking around a little bit like, who's going to be the guy to take this? And it felt a lot of times like the guys you expected to be leading the charge for them just kind of weren't. And I think the way you described it was like looking for more, or maybe it was Carter Hutton this morning talking about it, was looking for more with like William Nylander. You left you wanting more. That's kind of how I felt about a lot of them.
Yeah,
and that was what it was throughout the lineup. Yeah, so that was one thing for them, for me.
How much chatter on Leafs Morning Take has there been about the Marner, Matthews, Nylander troika at this tournament?
Well,
has been
Jeff,
underwhelming.
I think this will answer your question. I made a thumbnail for them to post on a video that they put out today. If people want to go look at that, that has the 3 players you just named with the title "Gone Missing" and ghosts floating around the picture. So, if that helps you answer your question,
Understood.
yeah. I mean, honestly, and we're not going to make this a Leafs thing, but they've had a tough tournament. I think that you can look at defensive games and say, yeah, those guys stepped up, and there's been spots where they have. But I mean, we've gotten now to a point here where Mitch Marner played against Finland and was had the second least ice time of Team Canada forwards. And, as much as you can appreciate defensive games from some of those guys, those are the primary scorers in Toronto. And us as Leafs fans like to prop those guys up in the top conversations of players in the league and say they're the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And then when we go onto an international stage like this and they struggle to score, it is a little bit concerning. Kind of going back to NHL play and playoffs here, kind of coming around the corner. I'm not going to lie to you.
All right, well, we'll see what happens at trade deadline for your team here. But one more big game here before you start to really turn our attention back to the National Hockey League. Although we should mention as well, there has been so Grigory Denisenko is now a member of the Nashville Predators. Do you see that one? Like I
just saw that.
For future considerations, Grigory Denisenko was like what was he, top 15? Let me have a look here. He was like a top 15 pick once upon a time. Yeah, he was 15th overall, 2018, in the Rasmus Dahlin draft. And Colby Cohen always makes this point. He goes from Vegas for future considerations to Nashville. Colby Cohen always makes this point. At a certain point, you're no longer a first round pick. Like the allure of the first rounder and the potential, etc., it's just gone, and then you just are who you are. And even though it kind of feels like Grigory Denisenko has been around a long time, he's only 24 years old. Like, doesn't it feel like Grigory Denisenko is kind of always, because for so long with the Florida Panthers, Denisenko was like, oh, wait till this guy hits. Oh, wait till Denisenko hits. Oh, and they got another one in Denisenko, and then they didn't. and it never happened. Anyway, so small deal today. As we were wondering how many deals are going to get made here on this 2-day break between games, we got one.
Didn't we go into this tournament like prepare for chaos? These players left for the tournament and they said goodbye to their clubs. They don't think they're coming back, and it's like, okay, Denisenko got traded. Was there even another one? Did we see another? I'm like trying to think. Nothing happened here.
So there's all kinds of chatter about what the Buffalo Sabres are going to do here come trade deadline time. And listen, Dylan Cousins' name is very much out there. Alex Tuch's name is out there. You wonder about the Los Angeles Kings. You know who's been I'm talking just about scouts, and I generally don't like to play the which scouts are here game because I think it can be a real fool's errand and can lead you down a path. But you know who's been all over the Buffalo Sabres recently? Like with multiple scouts for different eyeballs on players? The Vegas Golden Knights. Take it for it. Do they want Tuch back? I don't know. Do they want Dylan Cousins? I don't know. I don't think they want Peyton Krebs back. But Vegas has been all over Buffalo. Before the break, Vegas was all over Buffalo. Now, I do know that Kelly McCrimmon likes his guys to have a lot of viewings. I get that. We all understand that. But just something to tuck away. Zach, and if it happens, remember we had this conversation. And if it doesn't happen, just forget
Gone
it.
From the internet.
Just gone. Okay, in the meantime, from talking about Sweden, let's talk about Finland. Our good friend Arpon Basu, senior writer at The Athletic, covering the Montreal Canadiens, and for this tournament, covering Team Finland. Arpon joins me now on the sheet. Arpon, how are you today? Good to see your face and hear your voice. How are you, pal?
I'm good, Jeff. How you doing? I'm glad to be on your new show. This is great.
Much appreciated. Thanks for classing up the joint a little bit here, Arpon. We need a little classier cut of guest here on the program. Much appreciated your attention.
I don't know what that says about your other guests, to be honest.
Well, listen, Arpon, I'll be honest with you. I love Uffe, but listen, we open the door for Greg Wyshynski every week here on this program, so it's an open door policy on goofiness when he's aboard, and Berkey comes by every Friday. So as we like to say, let's get ready to grumble with Brian Burke every Friday here on the program. Okay, let me, speaking of grumbling, how much grumbling is there around, and has there been around Team Finland during this tournament? You're covering Team Finland for The Athletic. Your thoughts on the team, and most specifically, your thoughts on that near comeback against Canada. First of all, the Lindell goal can't go in. That's a Binnington story. But then Granlund, talk about Dallas Stars pro scouts know what they're doing. That's been demonstrated over and over and over again. But just your thoughts on that near comeback and a pair of goals by the Dallas Star forward.
Well, Michael Granlund, I think, did himself some favors. He's a free agent this summer. Obviously, that's why Dallas got him. So good for him. I think overall for Finland, though, is the problem was that their primary source of offense was Michael Granlund. And no disrespect to him at all, but the elder statesman on the team, this is a core of Alexander Barkov, Mikko Rantanen, Roope Hintz, Patrick Laine, Sebastian. These guys did not produce at a level that was going to allow Finland to compete in this tournament. That's just the reality of it. And I think their coach, Antti Pennanen, who is a super interesting guy, once you got to sort of interact, I got to interact with him for a while. He said something interesting in Finnish. One of the Finnish reporters told me, because he was asked specifically about Aho and Hintz not producing. They didn't score a goal between them. Hintz didn't have a point in the tournament. And he sort of took that blame on himself. He never split them up. He kept them on the same line the whole time. But the reality for Finland is you cannot go into a tournament and get 2 goals total out of Patrick Laine, Alexander Barkov, Mikko Rantanen, Roope Hintz, and Sebastian Aho. And that's just they don't have that luxury. There's no wiggle room for them. So I think that's the main takeaway for Finland is that if they're going to compete a year from now in the Olympics, they're going to need these guys to step up far more than they did in this tournament. Not to say that they play badly.
Yeah.
But the bar for them is offense because there's not a lot of it outside of that group. Obviously, Granlund had a great tournament, but the rest of the lineup is pretty much two-way defensive guys who are going to try and sort of win their shifts or at least come out even on their shifts, so that the offensive guys can go out and win the game. And they just kind of didn't do that in the tournament.
One of the this is a question that you are uniquely qualified to answer or have a educated thought on. I'm just going to throw a name at you. I'm not going to back it up with a question. It's very irresponsible as a host to do. I'm just going to lob a name out at you and see the reaction and see what you have to say. But here we go. Patrick Laine.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was looking forward to try to get to know him. Obviously, he gets hurt in the preseason, comes back. The Canadian, he's not been super available in Montreal. Every time he is, it's a big deal with a ton of reporters surrounding him. I've never really had a conversation with him alone. And he's a unique guy. His teammates seem to like him. I remember Juraj Slafkovsky, right after he came back from injury, talking about the crazy stuff he says on the bench. He wouldn't actually tell us what it was, but that was kind of my first way of learning that Patrick Laine is a unique cat, is just not only Juraj Slafkovsky, but a few other guys just talking about the random stuff he says on the bench that you don't hear from other players. And you see how he's dressed. Like he's his own man, and I think he's pretty good in his own skin, but he can be a frustrating guy to coach. And I think Montreal's gotten a crash course in that. His first 10, 12 games, popped a goal a game pretty much. The power play became good solely because of him, or effective, I should say. I wouldn't use the word good, but it produced goals because he can produce goals out of nothing. And in this tournament, he played 3 games. Pennanen described 2 of them as pretty okay, which is the most lukewarm compliment you could possibly offer as a coach.
Pretty okay.
Pretty okay. He said it twice. Now, I don't know if that's like a language thing, like he just felt limited in what kind of things he could say, but he used that same term twice, after the first game and after the last game against Canada. And the game in between against Sweden, he thought he played really well, and I did too. And he put him – and what was interesting about that is he put him with the Florida Panthers checkers, Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen. I've been messing up his name the whole time, but Luostarinen. And it sort of, I think, informed my thinking as to what Patrick Laine might need on a 5-on-5 basis. Like 2 guys who are going to do the work, be the worker bees, as kind of John Cooper referred to his guys today, and get him the puck, And so yeah, he's a guy I haven't figured out, Jeff, to be honest with you. You said I'm uniquely qualified to answer it. I don't think I am, because I haven't really gotten to know him.
The reason I mentioned it, being covering both Finland and the Montreal Canadiens, like you've seen, and again, like this has been, like as far as seasons go, it's like, the toilet seat at a Stag and Doe, up and down, up and down, up and down. Like there have been as you mentioned, like 7 games in a row with a power play goal. And then there's like 5 games of floating back checks and the fans saying like, move your feet, like get going out there. Like, where is it? And then to the other point, and I don't necessarily think that this is bad because listen, if you can score goals, that's great. But if you're not scoring goals, what are you giving the team? There's just wants to set up and just like everyone else do the work. Just get me the puck. But if you do get him the puck, like there's a good chance that thing is going in because, when you think about scoring from distance, Matthews can do it. There's only a couple of other guys that can. Laine is one of those guys. Like I've always described his shot as not hard, but violent. Like when you see the shot, like, it is a violent shot that Patrik Laine has. But again, if he's not giving you that, what is he giving you? And here's the question that I have ultimately is, because Montreal fans are smart, you know this. What do Montreal fans do with Patrik Laine now?
Well, my question is, what does Patrik Laine do to win back those fans? Listen, he had his first preseason game. He created a sound in the Bell Center that very few players have. Ilya Kovalchuk, when he had a cup of coffee with the Canadiens, produced this sound. PK Subban used to do it regularly. Lane Hudson is doing it now. But this sound of anticipation in the Bell Center when he touched the puck for the first time, there was a little rush of energy, and it was palpable. You could feel it. So Montreal fans, yes, they're smart, but they're also wired to want a player like this. What Patrik Laine represents, an elite offensive player. They haven't had one in a very long time. That's why they're going so gaga watching Ivan Demidov clips from Russia. They have been dying for a player like this.
It does look good.
Forever. And this is why they went so crazy when they passed on Matvei Michkov in the draft. So it's so in terms of what they do with him, like, listen, he didn't get a point in his last 8 games heading into the tournament. He got benched in a game in Anaheim, had the lowest ice time on the team in several games. I think the frustrating thing, if I were his coach, what's aggravating is that there are shifts where he'll go out and he'll do great things without the puck. He will finish his hits. He will back check. He will create turnovers in the defensive zone and get the puck going the other way. Do all the things that you want your forwards to do when they're not scoring, but they only last for individual shifts. They exist in isolation. And so you would like to be able to say that he does that regularly, and he doesn't. The fact is he doesn't, but it's in him. And so as a coach, your job is to get that out of him more often. I think several coaches have failed to do that so far. And so it's a valid question to say whether that is actually possible. But you see that the skill set, the hand-eye coordination is just so tantalizing on this guy. Like he can... Sure. His bad shot ability or his ability to turn bad passes into one-timers makes him very special and very unique. Like there's very few players who can, if any, who can do that specific thing as well as he can. It's just doing all the other things that allows him to get into situations to use that skill. Getting that out of him on a consistent basis is a challenge, to say the least.
So we have a question for you in the chat here at our YouTube stream. Energized asking you to share some of your thoughts on someone who's a late addition to this team is, the Miro Heiskanen factor here. Nicholas Matanpalo of the Ottawa Senators finds himself in what a season it's been for him. And then culminating, I'm sure if you talked to him a year ago and said, hey, you're going to be playing in the Four Nations, he probably would have scoffed, but there he was. Do you have a thought on...
Talked to him 2 weeks ago, he would have scoffed.
True. Good point.
Honestly, good
point.
So they played in Florida their last game before the tournament, and they got thumped by the Panthers, right? And so he had 2 options. Option number 1 was to just stay in Florida and enjoy the weather. Option number 2 was if Steve Staios was going to ask him to go back to Belleville and play some games there. Option number 3 did not exist, which was to play in this tournament. He didn't know going into that game that he was. The person who did know was his opponent that night, Alexander Barkov, the captain of Team Finland. He knew going into that game.
Right.
He kind of joked during the tournament that he never got a chance to line up with Matt and Paolo. I didn't have the heart to say, well, because he would never be on the ice with you at the same time. But he said that if he had lined up next to him, he would have maybe slid him a little heads up that, hey, I'm going to be playing with you in a couple of days. But he stayed in the lineup throughout the tournament. The defense was really a great story for Finland because they came into this tournament, no Heiskanen, no Ristolainen, no Hakanpää.
Yep.
a position group they could not afford to lose anybody on. They lose 3 of their top 4 guys. That's tough. And he was one of the big beneficiaries because he didn't play a lot of minutes. He didn't get put in difficult situations. He gave up a lot of goals playing next to Vakanainen, who was another injury replacement.
Yep.
But did himself a lot of favors. You know, he did not look bad out there. And the plus minus, I think, is misleading in his case. I think he was really solid. And not even a full-time NHLer, he made sure that a guy like Juuso Välimäki didn't get a sniff in the tournament. Like he earned his spot over a guy who's an established NHL defenseman. I mean, you know, whatever you think of Välimäki's game, he's an NHL player. So I think Matt Palo did himself a lot of favors, and honestly, I don't think it's going to be disregarded.
Sure.
When the team for Milan has to be picked just as a depth guy because he played a depth role really well for them.
Let me close with that because that's what I wanted to get to sort of as a crescendo here. What, if anything, can we pull out of Finland's performance at the Four Nations and say, this is why this player is trending towards going to Italy. This is why this player is playing their way off of any type of consideration? Or is that even fair in a tournament this short?
Well, listen, I mean, it's my question, and I'm not really qualified to answer that, is if they're allowed to take players from Finland, would this team look different? Right. You know, like they don't really have an excess overflow of NHL guys. You know, I guess you could argue maybe Jesperi Kotkaniemi could have made this team, maybe, but it's borderline, and I think you can make arguments either way on that one. Defensively, there's one guy who's played a game in the NHL who was never on this roster, which is Ville Heinola, and who's obviously had his injury issues and all sorts of other mitigating factors for him. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they left a bunch of guys at home. So this is what they have. So the one wild card is, are there guys playing in Liga in Finland that they would be more comfortable with? But to me, the two guys, and I felt this way even in the playoffs last year, like Lundell and Luostarinen, like those guys are what Finland is all about. You know, like they are like identity guys for this team. And I think they're going to look great on this team in Milan as well.
I'm glad you mentioned Heinola. I think we all do. Anyone that's followed his career, and so many times he's been false started and been right there, and then an injury or something else. It's just like, you know, and he's wanted a trade
like
for a long
injuries.
time. And he's wanted the change of, and he's needed the change of scenery. I think Winnipeg understands that. Everybody understands that, and he still just seems like, geez, Arpon, I feel so awful, just like frozen in this spot. That has to be so frustrating for Heinola. Like, I don't know how you can't cheer for that guy to get himself into a better situation, because you know there's a good player there.
Yeah, and that's, you know, this is where, like, there's a window of opportunity for him to make this team next year, right? I mean, but he's got to show it. And the fact that, you know, they didn't bring him there, and they took a guy who spent, you know, more than half the season playing the AHL in Matt Palo, had to be a gut punch for him. You know, it really did, because this is a first round pick. And this was what was interesting. Like at the beginning of the tournament, like I looked into it, and he is him and Lassie Thompson, who both went in the first round of that draft. Those are the last first round defensemen to be drafted out of Finland. Neither of them are playing. Well, Thompson's back in Europe playing in Sweden. Heinola has not established himself in the NHL. And so before them, they were in 2019. I think in 2017 was the Heiskanen draft. So that's a long period of time to not produce any defensemen for a country. But for Heinola, you know, you think of all the promise he had and all the optimism even Winnipeg had about getting him. Like, they were thrilled at the time. I remember, like, they were really happy that they were able to nab him. But he's reached an age where it's make or break. I mean, as I mentioned, Thompson, same age, is already back in Europe. I'm starting to wonder if that's might not be the fate for Heinola, but he hasn't really had a fair shot yet, and I would be interested to see him get that at some point.
Just remember how much Ottawa wanted Thompson to go to Kelowna that year, and just like, nope, I'm going to Europe. Nope, I'm not going. Arpon, this has been a delight. Listen, great work covering Team Finland for The Athletic, and thanks so much for hopping on the show today. Continued success, and we'll check back as Line A watch continues here once the NHL games get going again in the on the weekend. We'll see if he can turn things around in Montreal. Thanks as always for stopping by.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
There he is, the great Arpon Basu, senior writer for The Athletic. His beat is the Montreal Canadiens, covering Finland for The Athletic. There's a few things there. I really do feel bad for Ville Heinola, and if you know the story, like that's a guy who should have been playing full time in the NHL by now. One of those, like, the potential is always there, and you're waiting for it. No, this is the year for Heinola. This is the year for Heinola. I think he did request a trade a couple of years ago. That obviously hasn't happened, and just feels like he's frozen and stuck right now. Lassie Thompson was not a name that I expected to hear this morning when I woke up there. Good on Arpon Basu for dropping that one on me, Zach Phillips. Hearing Lassie Thompson's name, boy, that brings a smile to my face. Anyhow, real quick here, because there's no games on the go. Like, we have a dark night in the tournament. Tomorrow's going to be the same way. But want to bring one thing up and remind you that our partner FanDuel, proud to connect fans to the major sports moments that matter to them. You know what happened today? Players who are not in the tournament report to their NHL teams. And I probably should have brought this up with Uffe. Calle Järnkrok returns for your Toronto Maple Leafs. I can recall being on Hockey Night in Canada with Scott Morrison on a feature we used to do called the iDesk. And I remember I was getting texts from Kyle Dubas, who at that point was a young agent for Uptown. And I think that Järnkrok would have been one of his. And Dubas was always interested in. Oh yeah. He with the Reynolds family, Uptown. So that's where Dubas essentially, I don't want to say broke in, but for lack of a better term, broke in. I remember him texting me about Calle Järnkrok and pointing out to me that in Swedish he has the coolest sounding last name of all time, and it's not even close. Do you know what Järnkrok translates as in Swedish?
No.
It's the best. Iron.
Okay.
Iron hook. Järnkrok translates
That's good.
Iron hook in Swedish.
good.
I'm like, Kyle, that's the coolest text you've ever sent me. That's awesome. He also liked to point out Kyle Clifford's nickname was the Colonel because his middle name was Frank. Think about it for a second. Kyle Frank Clifford, KFC. So his nickname.
That's so terrible.
What's the Colonel? Yeah. This is sort of peek into the young Kyle Dubas as an agent with Uptown back in the day. Anyhow, teams reporting back today. What? Games. Yeah. What is that one all about? Oh yeah, Dubas was awesome that way. Okay. So games get underway in the NHL on Saturday, but we've got one more. And who knows how many more surprises we're gonna get. Listen, maybe later on tonight, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I was on Spit and Chickles today wondering if, is Micah Ruggioni going to join the Americans? Like, is he going to be an emergency replacement? Are they dragging Chris Chelios out to play on the blue line? Like, at this point, I'm saying to myself, it's all up for grabs. It's all on the table. I have no idea what's going to happen. And you know what? I know there's people trying to be very specific about the rules here, and how come how come the Canadiens were able to do this with Thomas Harley, and how come these rules seem different for the Americans with Quinn Hughes, and we need an injury, etc. I don't care. Yeah. Is it okay to say I don't care? Put on as many. I don't care who you drag out. I don't care. You want to get Wayne Gretzky?
The whole Harley thing, Jeff, was nuts, too. The fact that he had to stand behind the doors with his helmet off, peeking behind the doors, watching practice, and then Cale Makar comes off the ice, and now you can go on.
Now you can go on.
Okay, that was dumb. I understand the rule of, you need another defenseman to go down before you can go in. If that's the way you wanted to go about it and establish things ahead of time, that's fine. But you lost the defenseman. You're down to 6. Like, who cares? Let the guy skate. I don't get it. And I say this with all due respect to Thomas Harley, who I thought was very good in the Saturday game against the U.S.
He was really good.
I thought he was very good. But like, let's just put it this way. And like, there was, I was getting like Americans, I was reading this, or just hockey fans in general, like pissed off that this was going on. I'm like, do you think Canada will, like, 100 times out of 100 wants Thomas Harley instead of Cale Makar? Yeah. You know, I say that with all due respect to Thomas Harley, and I do, again, think he was awesome. But like,
Thomas Harley would say the same thing. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like, you think he was like, you think they're sitting there like, nope, I think this matchup works way better for us if he's in and not Cale Makar. It's like, oh, like, they're trying to make sure we got enough players out on the ice. They're not trying to handicap people like this. If you got the injury, go for it. But I mean, and again, we saw it today here. It looks like they need to have another injury that takes place. Hence us talking about someone like Jake Sanderson coming down with stub toe or the sniffles here tonight for Quinn Hughes.
Check with our friends at FanDuel.
Yeah, exactly. I'm waiting for FanDuel to put up, does Jake Sanderson get sick by Thursday? It'll be, I will be in there.
That's awesome. Okay, let's shut her down on that one. The show returns tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks to Arpon Basu of The Athletic for stopping by, and thanks to Uffe Bodin he's the publisher of Hockey Sfarige, noted and longtime hockey reporter and commentator. When it comes to like hockey commentary and analysis, Uffe's the guy. In Sweden, you're getting a great person there to comment on all things Swedish hockey. Thanks to our producer Zach Phillips and occasional co-host, and also thanks to you. Today was kind of a different day. I know we focus so much on Canada and USA for the obvious reasons, and those are the headline teams. But like, I kind of, like, to be honest with you, I've kind of felt bad, like completely ignoring Sweden and Finland in all of this. And like, look, like, you know me, like, I really love international hockey. And I love the way that different cultures treat the sport. And that's why one of the reasons why I love things like the World Juniors when it goes overseas, or the World Championships every year, just to see the different fan bases and how they treat the game and how they present the game. And I have felt a little bit guilty of, not paying enough attention to Finland and not paying enough attention to Sweden. So that's all on me. In the meantime, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget, tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern, it is Morning Cup of Hockey. Johnny Lazarus, Colby Cohen. Make sure you're watching and listening to that show every single day. Is DFO live at noon tomorrow? Do we have a schedule on that one? Zach, do you know if they're on? Because they've been sort of bouncing around time slots. Do we know?
I think at noon. I'll check.
I think they're on noon Eastern tomorrow. So check that out. And then our little act is back tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern. Got it? Got it? Good. If you're in the chat, if you're listening, if you're watching, thank you. We are back tomorrow for the sheet. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.